All right, I want to bring you guys back to the year 1998. It's a pretty special year, right? I'm gonna give you guys some visuals. Musically, it was the year of the boy bands, right? You guys know which ones they were. Ace of Base was doing pretty well at that time. Bittersweet Symphony came out that year. Are you guys kind of visually and mentally getting yourself back there? I was 13 years old, which is not an age. There's a reason I'm not putting any pictures up there. Because for me, at this time in my life, my idea of a stylish wardrobe was to wear a t-shirt and then put another shirt over it that I had cut using scissors into a tank top. Are you guys getting the visual now? I had a bowl cut, you know, the whole deal. Now, I have not discovered music yet. I didn't know how to play music. I didn't discover that. But I still had teenage rebellion in me. No one here can understand that, I'm sure. But at 13, I had some angst in me that I needed to get out. And I told my dad last week, I said, you actually went pretty easy on me because you could have said a lot more embarrassing stories than you did. So he went pretty easy on me. But in the town I grew up in, it's a little town called Marinette. And it doesn't know if it's in the UP or Wisconsin. It's right in between. And so it is not an exciting town. There's not a ton to do. So if you have some teenage rebellion in you that you need to get out, the only option that you really had at that time was to be a skater. Do you guys remember when that was huge? It's not as big now as it used to be. And you could either skateboard or you could rollerblade. But the whole point was you went and you jumped downstairs and you grinded down railings. We didn't have a skate park, so you had to just do it wherever. And FYI, the business owners didn't appreciate that we were doing it. And so if you fell and someone came out and started yelling at you, the rest of us left you. That you're on your own at that point because we didn't want to get into trouble. But to know that you had made it as a skater, to know that you were in the upper echelon of that group of people, there was a set of stairs in our town that was connected to a hospital. And they were a really big set of stairs to the point where if you wanted to jump down them, you had to go really, really fast. And it was a really intense jump because you had to go fast. Adding to the danger level is once you landed, there was very quickly a busy street in front of you. So if you weren't good, you were going to go directly into the street. And so the key is if you could jump and do a 360 and land, you had made it. You were the guy. There was only a few people that could do that. And now you could either skateboard or rollerblade, like I said. Now here's the difference between the two. I rollerbladed. And the skateboarders always said, that's easier, which I think they had a point because they're connected to your feet. So if you're going to spin or something, it's easier. And I get that, and I think they had a point. But my point was always, rollerblading is a lot more dangerous. And let me explain it to you. When you're skateboarding and you go to jump down a set of stairs, what might happen every once in a while is right as you start, you're going to, in your head, go, this is not going well. Any of you guys start something and immediately go, this is not going how I thought it was going to go. If you have a skateboard, there's a thing called bailing where you can just kick the board and land on your feet. And so if you start to do something and you go, I don't like the way this is going, you can just kick the board out from underneath you. That is not possible in rollerblades. You're not going to get rollerblades off of your feet. So if you start to do a jump and you go, this is not going well, you better figure it out really quick because you're landing on wheels no matter what's going on. So it would happen, and this happened to me quite often as I was trying to perfect this trick, is I would be going fast, and you're going so fast and you're trying to spin that you kind of get off balance and you realize both of my feet aren't going to be underneath me when I land here. And so the only thing you can do if you're on rollerblades is try to at least get 1 foot underneath you so that you don't land directly on your elbow, which I've done before and would not recommend doing that. So you get 1 foot, but what do you think happens when you only get 1 foot underneath you and it has wheels on it? They're going to go right out from underneath you. And so over time, you get good at just getting another foot underneath you. And then that one's going to slip out. And then you get another foot underneath you. And eventually, you regain your balance. But what it looks like to other people is you are river dancing your way down the street. Because that's your only option when you're on rollerblades, because as soon as you get something underneath you, it flies right out from underneath you. But you have no options. You have wheels on your feet, and either you're going to figure it out, or you're going to have a broken wrist, or worse than that. So, some of you may feel like I do that describes your life pretty well in general. Like you're river dancing your way through your life. And as soon as you get one foot underneath you and think you're getting some sort of footing, it slips out, and then you're just scrambling to try to keep upright. And no matter what you do, your feet keep slipping out from underneath you, and it feels like you're just river dancing your way through life. That's how I felt for many years of my life. Is like, God, why can't I get some footing here? Why can't I seem to ever be in control of everything? I always seem to be just scrambling to get a foot underneath me. And that's what we're talking about today, because today we're just going to answer one question. That's all I wanted to do today, is answer one question, but I think it could be, one of the most important messages I've given you so far, because I think this question, if you don't know the answer to it, if you haven't really understood the answer to it, you could very well still be living your life that way, where you're struggling to simply get a foot underneath you. So would you pray with me over this message? God, I pray that your truth comes out this morning. God, I pray that I accurately display who you are and what you taught, Lord God. Let this change our lives. In your name we pray. Amen. I want you to picture with me two men graduating college. Really smart guys, both of them Christians, grew up in a Christian home, graduated at the top of their class, in good careers that are going to make them a good living. And now it's time for each of them to look at how they want to live their life. You guys know that you get out of college and it's time for you now to say, what do I want to build my life on? What do I want my life to be about? And so one of the men, he looks at people who seem to be very happy, and he looks at people who seem to have done life the right way, and he notices that they all seem to have certain things. They have a good marriage, and they have a nice home, and they have a good job where they've been promoted. They have a good salary and all of those things. And when he looks at it, he says, that looks really solid. That looks like a really stable life. I think I'm going to just make my life about that, and I'm going to build my life on those things. My relationship with God is going to be a part of it, but that looks so solid that I trust that I can build my life on that stuff, because I can see that other people who have those things seem to be stable from where I can see. So he starts to build his life on that. The other guy, instead, he sees that seems stable, but he questions it. And he goes, I don't know if that really is going to make me happy long term. I don't know if that really is going to be the answer. So instead, he looks at his relationship with God, and he begins to dive in and really try to figure out, God, who are you? And what point should you have in my life? How should my life change from you? And he keeps digging deeper into his relationship, and he decides he's going to build his life on his relationship with Jesus. And it's two very different paths. And jump 10 years down the line, and both of them have been through some trials like we all do. Maybe someone they thought they were going to be together with their whole life broke up with them. Maybe they did not get the promotion that they thought they deserved. Maybe they didn't have the savings built up to get the house that they really wanted. And the man who built his life on those things is absolutely destroyed. His relationship with God is gone. He's a bitter man that has really nothing. And yet the man who decided to build his life on Jesus still has everything, and all of those struggles barely seem to affect him much at all. And there's a really great teacher that was trying to describe this idea and this concept about what you build your life on. And so he said it this way. He said there were two men that were going to build a house. And the first man began to dig at the ground and said, you know what? I lucked out. This is already nice and solid. He scraped at it, he jumped on it and said, we are good to go. I can jump right into building my house. But yet the other guy kept digging and said, this feels solid, and right now it feels like it could handle the load, but I'm going to keep digging, and eventually he found solid rock. Now when he began to start building his house, the other guy was way ahead. He was behind. But he said, that's okay. Now that I have found solid rock, I'm going to build my house. And as you guys know the story probably, the storms came. The man who built his house just on the ground, it was not as solid as he thought it was. See, the elements tend to change the stability of certain things. And his house absolutely collapsed. And yet the man who took the time to find the foundation, the storms and the flood didn't affect his house at all. And you guys have probably figured out by now, the wise man was Jesus. And what I'm alluding to is a parable in Luke chapter 6. So if you want to look at Luke chapter 6, verse 47, Jesus is saying this: "As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like." And then he continues to tell the parable that I just told you guys. And the one question I want to ask you guys today, and this is really my whole point, is to just answer this question, is why do we need to have a foundation? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why is it so important to have a foundation? What is the point? Why is this something that Jesus talks about so much? And what you have to do is you have to look at what the dream of the church was. I love reading the Apostle Paul because, especially late in his life, he'd planted so many churches. He had led so many people to Jesus. He had done so much. And you see him kind of looking over it, and he's almost dreaming about what it could be. What is the point of all this? And you see that in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14. And he says, "Then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching." You see Paul, and he's saying, after all that I've done, after all of these things, I'm just dreaming about a church that is solid, a church that doesn't get tossed back and forth, a church that knows who it is and stands on what it is. And I've seen this pattern this past year, especially as I read my Bible. Don't ever stop reading your Bible, by the way, even if you've read it 100 times through, because God will keep revealing patterns to you. And this is a pattern he's revealed to me very clearly. This idea that it pleases God so much. It gets right to the heart of God when we stand firm. You see it over and over again. How much it pleases him when you stand firm, and how much it hurts him when we waver and are tossed back and forth. It's all over in the Bible. You see this pattern of God just saying, would you just stand? Would you just not be tossed around? Would you just know who you are and stand on what I have told you? And if I were to ask you what metaphor is used most in the New Testament to describe the church, I'd probably get a few different answers. Maybe a shepherd and sheep, right? I'm trying to think of some other metaphors that are used. Weddings, bridegrooms. But you know what I've noticed is used almost more than anything else to describe the church as a metaphor in the New Testament? Is construction. Do you guys know that? Construction is used a ton in the New Testament to talk about the church. In fact, the sermon that we just did, the series, was on counting the cost. Do you guys remember the parable that he gave? It was about building something and running out before it's finished. And even if you look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, it says, "You also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood." So this construction, this idea of construction, is used a lot in the Bible. And we need to understand, why is this used so often, and what can we learn about it? So I'm going to bring you back to the parable to answer the question, why is it so important to have a foundation? And if you look at Luke chapter 6, verse 49, here's what it says. It says, "The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete." That obviously was not the house put on the foundation. But my question is, what was the common denominator between the two houses? Storms. Storms are going to hit both houses. Having a foundation does not prevent storms from coming. I hate to break bad news. Storms are coming. That's going to happen. Whether you have built your life on Jesus or whether you have not, storms are coming. In fact, even in Ephesians where he says, "Then you won't be tossed back and forth by the waves." If waves are trying to toss you back and forth, what is probably happening? There's probably a storm. Waves are not going to be trying to toss you back and forth on a calm, nice, easy day. And that's one thing you're always going to have in common with the world. So if you're saying, well, I look at unsaved people and I don't have anything in common with them, nope, you will always have that in common, that you're all going to go through storms. You will always have that in common. So you have to build for the storm. That's why foundations are so important, is you have to build your life for the storm because it's been promised that storms are coming. But then you have to ask, why does a foundation allow you to stand in a storm? What is it about having a foundation that changes the game when a storm comes? I'm going to bring you to Luke chapter 6, verse 48. It says, when a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. So here's the answer to the question. Why do we need to have a foundation? Why is it so important? Here's the answer is your strength comes from your foundation. That's where all of your strength comes. Leslie's brother played hockey in high school. I never played hockey, so I love to hear his stories because it's something I've never experienced. And her brother is not a very big guy. He's a pretty small, average-sized guy. And one of the years, I believe he said it was his junior year, there was a couple linebackers from the football team that decided, I'm going to join hockey because I hear you get to just hit people. And we like hitting people, so we're going to join. We're bigger and stronger than everyone else, and we're just going to lay people out. And so they tried that, and in the first practice, they both got laid out again and again by people half their size, to the point where they did not even make it through the entire season because they were tired of getting destroyed by people half their size. Now, how does that work? How do you get laid out by someone half your size? You don't have footing. You see, Leslie's brother had footing. He had done it his whole life. He was able to be solid while still on ice. They did not. Your strength doesn't mean anything if you don't have footing. Do you guys know that? You can do all the curls in the world, and if your feet are slipping, you have no power to do anything. Foundations are where everything comes from. Your strength always comes from your feet. You're never going to be big and bad if you're river dancing. Anyone ever seen someone river dancing and being intimidated? No. It is the great equalizer. No matter how strong someone is, if they are slipping and sliding all around, they're really just not that scary, are they? It's the footing that makes someone strong. We need to have a foundation. You might be asking, but how do I do this? How do I get a foundation? Okay, Pastor, yes, I've been slipping and sliding, and I've spent most of my life just trying to get my feet underneath me, but how do I get a foundation? And I'm going to bring you to two verses because there's something really important in here. So I'm going to read verse 47 and then a bit out of verse 49. And here's what it says. As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. So that's the guy with the foundation. Now listen, here's the guy without one. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice. Now there's two major differences there. We all probably noticed that the man without the foundation did not put his words into practice, right? But did you miss the other thing that was missing with the man who didn't have the foundation? He never came. You see, that's a little sneaky thing they added. Whoever comes to me, hears me, and does it. But then when they were talking about the man without the foundation, he simply heard. He never came. And this is a major truth that we have to understand. A lot of us will listen to our podcast or we'll read a verse of the day or something and we're hearing, but we're not coming to Jesus. We're not really sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening to what he has to say. We're hearing from a distance, but there's never a true desire to change, right? Hearing doesn't make you change until you're listening. And that's why I keep telling you guys, and I'll keep telling you again, is that we need to be a church of one thing. Because if you're a church of one thing, you can be a church of everything. And I bring you to the story of Mary and Martha. Because Jesus himself, I love when I can go right to Jesus' words. He says, only one thing is needed, and Mary figured it out. What was the one thing that she figured it out? Come and sit at the feet of Jesus. That is what she figured out. She figured out the secret of how can you do one thing and be successful, because her one thing was coming and sitting at the feet of Jesus. You see, Martha was hearing. I'm sure Martha heard what Jesus was saying, but she was running around, she was scrambling, and she never came to him. And when you're hearing, your life never changes. Husbands, you know the difference between hearing and listening. Don't tell me you don't. There's a difference. Martha was hearing, Mary was listening. She came and sat down. She figured out the one thing. But this is difficult. Guys, this is hard to do. If you look at Luke chapter 6, verse 48, it says, "They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on a rock." You're going to have to dig further than you want to. That's just how it goes. And it's going to feel good enough. The ground always feels good enough if you've never felt what rock feels like. I'm going to say that again. The ground always feels solid until you've actually felt the rock to compare it to. And then you realize, oh, that is not as solid as I thought that was. But it's tricky, because if I were to jump off this roof, that ground would feel pretty solid, wouldn't it? And we trick ourselves into saying, yeah, this is good enough. This is nice. But we don't understand that there's something deeper, and we have to keep digging deeper to find that. So you have to ask yourself, what was Mary doing at the feet of Jesus? What was she actually doing? Mary was finding her foundation. That's what she was doing. She was digging deep. She was finding the rock. She was saying, I'm not going to get up from this place until I have solid rock to put my feet on. And then I will start building my life. But I will not build my life. I will not start building anything until I've found your foundation. Martha already thought she had a foundation, and she was busy trying to build her life on something that in the end, when the storms come, are going to crumble because she didn't have a solid foundation. And if you've been river dancing, today is the day to find a foundation. And that's what I'm saying is, if you say, this is me, I've been slipping all over the place, I feel like all I'm trying to do in my whole life is get one foot back underneath me, then today we need to pray for you, and you need to spend some time. And it won't be a one-day thing, but let's get it started, where you start to dig and find your foundation. Sit at the feet of Jesus and hear what he has to say. Because if you build your life on anything other than the true and pure and complete word of Jesus Christ, it's gonna crumble. You guys have seen it. I have seen it. There is no solid ground outside of Jesus Christ. Sitting at his feet and truly allowing him to speak truth into your life. But it all starts with coming to his feet and hearing him. But before we get into prayer time, I want to announce something to you guys. This is why we're doing the business meeting, is because we're going to be voting on a name change in 2 weeks. But I want to give you guys some time to process it. I don't think it'd be very fair for me to just say, here's the new name idea, let's vote, right? Sometimes it takes a little time to think about it and process it. So today, I want to give you guys that. I would say, pray about it. You have 2 weeks. Don't feel like you need to make any snap decisions. But the name that I'm going to be bringing forward to you guys that I think that God has called us to is Foundation Church. Do you want to put it up? Here's why I feel like that is where God's leading us. Because I have told you guys again and again, we want to be a church of one thing. We want to be a church that sits at the feet of Jesus, hears from him, and reacts to what he is telling us to do. That's a church with a foundation. That's a church who knows who it is. We're not going to be tossed back and forth. We are not going to say, well, this is nice over here, but maybe tomorrow we're going to be a church that knows where we are. We're going to be a church that has found our foundation, that is committed to sitting at the feet of Jesus and reacting to whatever Jesus tells us to do. Now, you might be saying, well, why not firm foundation or solid foundation or 18 other words? Here's why. A couple reasons. First of all, whenever you name your church multiple names, everybody abbreviates it to one name anyways, right? And then people get confused because they try to look it up online and there's nothing that matches it. So if we're going to call it Foundation Church, we might as well name it Foundation Church. But even more than that is what it allows us to do is unify all our ministries together. So if you would put up the next slide, it would allow us to have Foundation Kids and Foundation Youth. When you keep it to one name, it makes everything clear. If you know me, I don't like confusion. I like simplicity. I like everyone to know. And so it allows us to brand everything together underneath one name so people aren't wondering, what's your youth group name? What's your kid's name? Is this connected to your church or not? It makes it easier. So, and as you can see, the logo that we went with, very simple. It's an F that turns into a cross. because that is our foundation. Everything has to be based on that. But that is going to be the name that I'm going to bring forward to you guys in 2 weeks that you can vote yes or no on if you're a member. And if you hate the name, please vote no, okay? Because I don't want you to have a name that you guys don't like. But to me, I have spent a lot of prayer on this, and I feel very comfortable that this is what I am supposed to bring forward to you guys to vote on. Because this is the vision for the church, is for us to be a church that is solid, that sits at the feet of Jesus, hears what he says, and does it, and a church that's not tossed back and forth by every wind. Amen?